We all look at those people who've just achieved incredible things, Bill Gates, the Beatles, maybe Robert Oppenheimer, and you can't help but wonder, how did they do that?
Right. What's the secret? They're so far beyond the norm. Statistically, they're outliers.
Exactly. And the story we usually tell ourselves, or the one we hear, it's all about their individual genius, their amazing drive, purely self-made.
That's definitely the popular narrative. It's appealing, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
That it just comes down to talent and working super hard.
It is. But maybe that's not the whole story. For this deep dive, we're kind of pushing aside that myth, the totally self-made person idea.
Uh-huh.
We're going to dig into those, less obvious things, the hidden factors that Malcolm Gladwell talks about in Outliers. Things like, well, when you were born,
Or your background.
your cultural background, those
Yeah.
early chances that maybe seemed random at the time but ended up being huge. That's our mission here, to unpack those hidden ingredients.
And what's so great about Gladwell's approach is he really pushes us to look beyond just the person. He wants us to see the whole context, the ecosystem where that success actually happens. It's a much richer picture than just, talent plus effort.
Absolutely. So what are we actually diving into? We'll kick off with the, well, frankly, surprising impact of your birth month and even your birth year.
Right.
Then we'll get into that famous 10,000-hour rule, but really unpack what deliberate practice means. It's not just hours logged.
Crucial difference.
Yeah. And we'll look at IQ and success. It's not as simple as high IQ equals success, apparently.
Twist there.
Uh-huh. Plus, we'll examine how parenting, socioeconomic background, they play a role. And finally, something really fascinating, the power of cultural legacies.
Often totally overlooked.
Okay, let's get into it. Starting with something as basic as the month you were born. Seems wild, right?
It does, but there's this great research by Roger Barnsley, a psychologist who looked at Canadian hockey players.
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
He found that a huge chunk, like a disproportionate number, of the elite players were born early in the year. January, February, March.
Which, at first you think, what possible connection could there be? February baby equals good puck handler. Makes no sense.
Right. But then you look at how youth sports leagues are structured, those age cutoffs.
Ah, the cutoff dates. Usually January 1st, right?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
So a kid born January 1st could be playing against someone born December 31st of the same year. They're in the same age group, but one kid is almost a full year older.
And at that age, being physically bigger, more mature, that's a massive advantage.
Exactly. So, subconsciously or not, coaches might pick those bigger, more developed kids for the select teams.
Okay, I see where this is going.
And then those kids get the better coaching, more ice time, more practice, more games. It just snowballs.
It's that accumulative advantage Gladwell talks about.
Precisely. A small initial edge, totally arbitrary based on birth month, leads to more opportunities, which leads to better skills, reinforcing the advantage.
Wow, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. And it's not just hockey, is it? You see it in schools too.
Yeah, similar patterns show up.
Yeah.
The oldest kids in the class sometimes perform better initially on standardized tests for similar reasons. Early maturity, more time to grasp concepts, perhaps.
So if you're a parent or a coach, maybe you need to think about this. Look beyond just the current size or skill.
It certainly suggests a more nuanced way to evaluate potential, doesn't it? Maybe looking for raw talent that hasn't had the same developmental advantages yet. Okay, so that's birth month. What about birth year?
This one really struck me. Gladwell highlights how so many of the pioneers of the PC revolution, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Bill Joy, folks like that, were all born in a really tight window, like the mid-1950s.
Right, and if you zoom out and look at tech history, it clicks.
How so?
Well, they were born just as personal computers were starting to emerge as a concept, maybe a bit later as reality. They were young enough, teenagers or early 20s, right when the whole thing exploded in the mid-70s.
Ah, okay. The perfect age to dive in, experiment, learn. Just as the industry was taking off, they caught the wave.
They were perfectly positioned, old enough to understand it, young enough to embrace it fully, and not be tied down to older tech or career paths.
Because if they were born, say, 10 years earlier,
maybe they're already established mainframe programmers, or in a different field entirely, less likely to jump into this risky new thing.
So it was this very specific sweet spot, timing, demographic luck, as Gladwell calls it.
Incredible demographic luck.
Sure.
But okay, being in the right place at the right time gives you the chance.
But you still have to do something with it.
Exactly. Which leads us nicely to the 10,000-hour rule.
Right. The idea, based on Anders Ericsson's research, that mastery takes about 10,000 hours of practice. A lot of practice.
A serious commitment. It's not trivial.
And Gladwell gives great examples. Bill Gates, famously getting access to programming time way back, hours and hours as a teenager.
Obsessively programming, yeah.
And the Beatles, playing those marathon sessions in Hamburg clubs night after night.
Apparently, they played something like 1,200 times live before they even hit it big. By the time Beatlemania happened, they'd easily blown past 10,000 hours.
And people who saw them before and after Hamburg said they were transformed. That grueling schedule forged them.
It completely demolishes the idea of overnight success, doesn't it?
Totally. But as you hinted before, it's not just about the number of hours, is it? It's about the kind of practice.
That is the absolute key point. Just showing up isn't enough.
So what's the difference? What makes practice count towards mastery versus just messing around?
It's what Erickson calls deliberate practice. This means it's focused, it's structured, you have specific goals.
Pushing yourself.
Yes, constantly pushing beyond your current comfort zone and skill level. And, crucially, getting feedback. You need support, guidance.
Like Mozart, learning from his father, getting constant feedback from day one.
A perfect example. Or think about Gates again. He didn't just have time on a computer. He had access to very advanced systems for that era, and often resources through his elite school.
Right. So those early opportunities, sometimes linked to having the money or connections, they allow you to rack up those hours of deliberate practice.
Exactly. Having the time, the tools, the guidance,
Yeah.
it makes accumulating those effective hours possible, often starting much earlier.
Which gives you a huge head start. Okay, so opportunity and deliberate practice are key. What about pure brain power? Intelligence, IQ.
Ah, yes. We tend to assume higher IQ just automatically leads to more success, straight line up.
Seems logical.
But Gladwell argues for something called the threshold effect.
No.
Basically, yes, you need a certain amount of intelligence to succeed in complex fields. That's undeniable.
Okay, a baseline.
Right. But once you cross a certain threshold, maybe an IQ around 120, 130, somewhere in that range, having an even higher IQ doesn't necessarily guarantee more real-world success. Other factors start mattering more.
Whoa. Okay, so someone with a 145 IQ isn't automatically going to achieve more than someone with a 130.
Not necessarily, no. Which is why just focusing on IQ scores for, say, college admissions or hiring might be missing the point.
So what are those other factors that become more important above that threshold?
This is where practical intelligence comes in. Gladwell uses the fascinating contrast between Christopher Langan, who has an exceptionally high IQ, maybe one of the highest ever recorded,
I've heard of him, yeah.
and Robert Oppenheimer, leader of the Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer also had a very high IQ, no doubt, but not Langan level. Yet Oppenheimer achieved massive impact.
And Langan, less so in conventional terms.
Right. Gladwell suggests a key difference lies in their upbringing and how it developed or didn't develop their practical intelligence.
Okay, define practical intelligence. It's not book smarts, right?
No, it's more like street smarts,
Yeah.
social intelligence.
Yeah.
Psychologist Robert Sternberg called it knowing what to say to whom, knowing when to say it, and knowing how to say it for maximal effect.
So navigating social situations, reading people, knowing how to get what you need, persuasion.
All of that. Asserting yourself effectively, negotiating, understanding unspoken rules. It's learned, not innate like raw IQ might be argued to be.
Learned. Which takes us straight to parenting, doesn't it? How you're raised.
Absolutely. Sociologist Annette Lareau's work is crucial here. She studied how parents from different socioeconomic backgrounds raise their kids.
And found different styles.
Yes. She found wealthier families often engage in what she called concerted cultivation.
Concerted cultivation. Sounds intense.
It kind of is. They actively manage their kids' lives, lots of organized activities, lessons, sports. But more than that, they encourage their kids to ask questions, to challenge things, to negotiate with adults, even authority figures.
So they're basically teaching them how to interact with institutions, how to advocate for themselves.
Exactly. They're coaching them, consciously or not, in the skills of practical intelligence. They develop a sense of entitlement, which sounds negative, but Lareau means it more like they feel entitled to have their needs met and opinions heard.
Okay. And what about working class families in her study?
Lareau found they more often followed a philosophy of accomplishment of natural growth, less structured time, more letting kids figure things out on their own.
More independence, maybe.
Perhaps. But also, communication tended to be more directive. Less negotiation, more emphasis on respecting authority. Kids learned to be more deferential, less assertive with adults in power.
So growing up in one environment versus the other gives you a very different toolkit for navigating the world later on, different levels of practical intelligence.
That's the argument. It highlights how much your success depends on skills learned outside of formal education, skills heavily influenced by your family background.
It really broadens the picture beyond just individual talent or school smarts. Okay, one more big piece, cultural legacies.
This is such a fascinating angle. Gladwell looks at why certain cultural groups might appear to excel in specific areas. The example he uses prominently is math ability among students from Asian backgrounds.
Right, the stereotype. But he argues there's something more systematic going on.
Yes, potentially rooted in language and historical work ethics. First, language structure.
How does language affect math?
Well, in many Asian languages, like Chinese, the number system is incredibly logical and regular compared to English.
How so?
Think about counting. In English, after 10, we get 11, 12, totally irregular, then 13, 14. But in Chinese, it's basically 10, 1, 10, 2, 10, 3. 2, 10 is 20, 2, 10, 1 is 21. It's completely transparent.
Ah, so the structure of the numbers makes place value in basic arithmetic much more intuitive.
Exactly. It seems to give kids learning math in those languages a slight cognitive edge, making concepts easier to grasp early on. Yeah. Fractions are also named more logically.
Interesting. That's the language part. What about the work ethic? He links it to rice farming.
Yes, the legacy of wet rice agriculture. Unlike growing wheat, which has periods of intense work followed by downtime, traditional rice farming is incredibly labor-intensive all year round.
Constant work.
Meticulous, demanding, requiring incredible persistence, precision, and coordination. Thousands of hours of sustained effort year after year. Gladwell suggests this history cultivated a deep cultural value for hard work, persistence, and the belief that effort, not just innate ability, leads to success. If you work hard enough at something complex, you'll figure it out.
And that attitude is perfect for tackling difficult math problems, where persistence really pays off.
Precisely. So you have this potential combination, a language that makes math slightly easier to grasp initially, and a cultural disposition that values perseverance through complex challenges.
Wow. It really reinforces that central idea, doesn't it? Success isn't just about the individual seed.
It's Gladwell's metaphor of the tallest oak tree in the forest.
Right. It's not just the strongest acorn.
No. It needed the richest soil, the most sunlight, enough water, protection from blight. It needed the right conditions. Talent needs opportunity and the right environment to flourish.
Thinking about your own path, can you pinpoint any of those maybe unexpected opportunities or advantages that helped along the way?
Oh, that's a reflective question. I suppose everyone has some, if you look closely enough. Maybe access to certain books, a particular teacher. It makes you think.
It does, and it really underscores the importance of creating those conditions, that fertile soil for more people, which brings us to things like the KIPP Academy example.
Yes, in the South Bronx, a school taking kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, no selective admissions.
And getting amazing results, especially in math. How?
A big part of it is simply more time. They have longer school days, Saturday sessions, summer school. They counteract the learning loss that disproportionately affects lower-income kids over the summer.
That research by Carl Alexander, right, showing how summer breaks widen the achievement gap.
Exactly. KIPP provides the time and the supportive, demanding environment, the sunlight and water that allows those students' potential to grow.
So understanding all these hidden factors, birth dates, practice, opportunity, intelligence thresholds, practical skills, cultural legacies, it really should change how we think about success.
It moves us away from just worshiping the individual genius, the self-made myth. It shows how much context matters.
Like Gladwell's point about Bill Gates getting that incredibly rare, almost unlimited computer access back in 1968.
We marvel at him, but maybe the real question is, what if hundreds or thousands of other teenagers had gotten that same opportunity back then?
How many more Bill Gateses might there have been? How much potential are we leaving untapped because the opportunities aren't there?
That's the provocative thought, isn't it? It challenges us to think about how we structure opportunities in society, in education, in our own fields. How can we create more fertile ground for more tall trees to grow? Potential is everywhere, but opportunity, that's often not the case.